Good morning and welcome to this meeting of the Mid Suffolk District Council Planning Committee. May I first remind you of some domestic arrangements. Please ensure that microphones are turned off when not in use. Please do not interrupt other speakers or hold separate conversations whilst others are speaking. If you are attending the meeting to speak and persistently interrupt the meeting, you may be asked to leave. Please ensure that your mobile phones are on silent or switched off and that your laptops are switched to silent. I would like to remind everyone present that this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of repeated viewing. The whole of the meeting will be recorded except where there are confidential or exempt items. If you make a representation to the meeting, you will be deemed by the Council to have consented to being recorded. By entering this meeting as a speaker, you are also consenting to being recorded by the Council and to the possible use of those sound recordings for webcasting and/or training purposes. The Council, members of the public and the press may record, film, photograph or broadcast this meeting when the public and the press are not lawfully excluded. If you are intending to do so, please could you inform the committee clerk. If you hear the fire alarm, leave the building immediately via a fire exit and make your way to the assembly point at Ipswich Town Football Ground. Follow the signs directing you to the fire exit at each end of the floor. Do not enter the atrium, that's the ground floor area and the walkways. If you are in the atrium at the time of the alarm, follow the signs to the nearest fire exit. Use the stairs, not the lifts. Do not re-enter the building until told it is safe to do so. So before we begin, there are some introductions. We've got the members of the committee on my right. They will be debating and determining the applications. On my left-hand side, we have, first of all, we've got one of the case officers, Alex Scott. Then we've got Area Planning Manager, Gemma Walker, the Chief Planning Officer, I can't remember his job title, Phil Isbell. And then we've got other case officers who will be doing the case, the second case. We have some ward members, Councillor John Whitehead and Councillor Andrew Stringer, who will be speaking on their cases. And just later on during the morning proceeding, we are expecting some visitors who are visiting the County Council today from Project 21. I understand there's likely to be about 10 or so of them. They will probably be coming in to watch our second case. They're visiting us because they're visiting the County Council today and we are the meeting that's happening in the Council chamber. So we may have to have a slight break while they sort themselves out. So if I can then move to the, and I've also got my governance officers, Claire Philpott, Mandy Smith and Beth Webb, who will make sure that everything is in order, and we've got the legal advisor in Dupre. So can I move to the agenda? Do we have any apologies for absence and substitution?
None received, Chair.
Thank you. Number 2, received declarations of disclosable pecuniary interests and other registrable or non-registrable interests by members. Are there any to declare? No?
Well, yeah, if I may, you can recognise Councillor Penny. He can add to what I'm about to say if it's necessary. Councillor Penny, as you know, is not a regular member of this committee. He is one of the 2 ward members. He took my advice yesterday. I've spoken to the acting monitoring officer, so we're agreed on this situation that Councillor Penny, I think I'm going to start calling him Mr. Penny because that's what he is in this meeting. Mr. Penny is an objector to the Hemingstone item, the second item, and if he was here as a member of the committee, he would be obliged to declare a disclosable pecuniary interest because he's an objector. That doesn't automatically lead to you having a pecuniary interest, but he is a neighbouring landowner whose property might be affected by the success or failure of the application. If he were here as a member, the law would require him not to speak or vote or be in the room at all. But I and the monitoring officer have agreed that because he's not here as a member of the committee, he's not exercising he's sensibly leaving the role of ward member to Councillor Whitehead, who is here today. But it is acceptable for him to speak as an objector as long as he leaves the room as soon as the public speaking is finished and we go into debate, and that's what we will do today. and I'll speak to the clerk about how we put that in the minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Penny. Item number 3, declarations of lobbying. Have any declarations of lobbying to declare? No. Number 4, declarations of personal site visits. Are there any to declare? No. Number 5, confirmation of the minutes of the Planning Committee meeting, MPL 2316, which was held on the 11th of October 2023. Are there any points regarding the accuracy of the minutes? No. Could I have a proposer? Thank you, Councillor Hedingham, and a seconder, Councillor Davis. So the Governance Officer will now conduct the electronic vote, and Councillor Lawrence will have to do his manually.
Thank you, Chair. Members, that vote is in progress on your apps. Councillor Lawrence. 4. Thank you.
Councillor Warboys, are you having trouble with the app? Do you want to do it manually, or have you just done it? Does it come through?
Thank you, members. Chair, that's 7 votes for and 1 abstention. That's carried.
Thank you. So the minutes of the meeting have been confirmed and will be signed in due course. So we now move to item number 6, to receive notifications of petitions in accordance with the Council's petition scheme.
None received, Chair.
Thank you. Right, so item number 7 is the schedule of planning applications. We will stick to the order of the agenda. So we will go straight to DC 2300305, land adjacent to 17 Brockford Road, Mendlesham. And I will invite the case officer, Alex Scott, to introduce the application to the committee. Thank you, Alex.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, members, this is item 7A in the agenda, application DC 2300305, land adjacent to 17 Brockford Road in Mendlesham. And the application seeks full planning permission for the change of use of land for grazing of horses and erection of stables with new vehicular access. Now, there are several items in the late papers, which I'd like to draw your attention to, please. Now, the application has been called to committee at the request of the ward member, Councillor Stringer, and the call-in form is attached with reference to a prior planning appeal on part of the site for 8 dwellings, which is also attached in the table papers, along with the relevant red and blue site location plan for that particular case and application. And as summarised, there are concerns from the ward member with regards to harm to the historic setting of the site, the erosion of highway safety, and conflict with neighbouring neighbourhood plan policy MP10, which relates to open spaces and to principal views, which I've provided at slide 10 of the presentation. And the site is also visually important open space, and local plan policy SB3 of the 1998 plan is therefore also relevant and referred to in my report. Now, we have had a very late representation received from your heritage officers in terms of an update of their position. This was received at 5:20 yesterday afternoon, and I believe we have copies which have been or can be circulated.
I think they need to be circulated.
Okay.
So if we could just allow the governance officer
Yes,
to
yes.
distribute them.
Yeah, yes, yeah.
And should we also, I think we need to perhaps have a break to allow members to read it. If that's all right, Alex, we'll just stop you in mid-flow there and let everyone read the paper. Right, has everyone, have you all had time to read the late paper? Thank you. If we go back to you then, Alex. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. So just to summarise for anybody listening in who hasn't had the benefit of reading that. So it's a view of your heritage officers, members, that the site is has a historically rural setting of Mendlesham and makes a contribution to the character and appearance of the conservation area and the significance of the Grade 1 listed Church of St Mary's. The site is split by modern development, including 2 new dwellings, which are currently into construction and have extant planning permission. And this has now left a rather constrained, narrow gap within the street scene frontage when compared historically. So it's your heritage officer's view that the contribution to the significance of heritage assets is now more limited in the location where the stable building is proposed. Your heritage officers raise no objection to the general design and character of the building itself, but note that this would close off the remaining connection between the assets and their rural surrounds. Your heritage officer's view is that harm is increased by the extent of the building and associated parking and hard standing, and they have identified a very low level of less than substantial harm to the setting and significance of the heritage assets. And that is due to the now limited importance of the area. And they've advised alterations to the scheme, perhaps reducing the size of the building, pushing it closer to the approved dwellings and rotating through 90 degrees and reducing the extent of the car parking area. And they have recommended conditions with regards materials and landscaping and fences in particular. And your heritage officers do not consider the change of use of the remainder of the site to result in any form of harm at all to the setting significance of heritage assets, and they consider that to still be in keeping broadly with the historic use of the site. So that's just a brief summary there. Okay, so moving to the presentation itself. So we have the location of Mendlesham there within the district. This is an aerial map of the site and surrounding area, and the site extends to approximately 1.4 hectares. Here we have a constraints map of the site. So the site lies outside of the settlement boundary, which is edged in brown here, and I do have a better plan at the request of the chairman on the next slide, so I'll refer to that in due course. And so the site comprises an area of grassland in grade 3 agricultural quality, although it's not currently in use for food production. Excuse me. Access to the site does lie within Environment Agency flood zones 2 and 3, which you can see is here, this blue hatched area. But the remainder of the site is within Environment Agency flood zone 1, where there is the least likelihood of flooding from river or tidal sources. As referred to in your Heritage Officer's comments, the proposal site affects the setting of the Grade 1 listed church, which is here, highlighted in green, and the churchyard, which extends to approximately here. And there is also a moated area here, which is a scheduled ancient monument, so another heritage asset which the proposal would affect the setting of. And we have the conservation area here, also a heritage asset highlighted in purple hatch, but the site does lie outside of that conservation area, but does affect the setting. So we move now to an excerpt from the neighbourhood plan, figure 2.2. So you can see the settlement boundary here edged in black, and the conservation area boundary edged in red. We also have the public footpath, which crosses the cemetery here and runs along the north boundary of the site, adjacent to the moated site, and out here to the this lane connecting to Brockford Road at the end. The site is also, as previously mentioned, an area of visually important open space, as designated in the current 98 local plan, and affects view 10, which is here, principal view 10, and that's designated in the current neighbourhood plan. This is the red line site location plan submitted with the application. So the area edged in red is the extent of the site, and the area edged in blue has extant planning permission for 2 dwellings, which I believe is currently under construction. And the blue colour also indicates land in control of the applicant. So here we have the proposed block plan in the location of the operational development, the physical development of the site. So the proposed building is set forward of the site, approximately 4.6 metres from the fronting boundary, which is delineated by this hedgerow, which is existing and proposed to be retained. And it's approximately 20 metres from the corner of the site here. Access is proposed to be by the existing field access here, which has approval to be upgraded as part of the development for the two dwellings, which you can see the nearest dwelling here, currently under construction. Boundary treatments throughout the site would be a mix of 1.2 metre high post and rail fences, predominantly in this area, and post and wire fences for the remainder. And there's an additional hedge to the cemetery boundary proposed in this location. And part of the conditions, we're looking to secure those by landscaping conditions and further information as well as part of a landscaping scheme, should you be minded to approve, of course. Right. So onto the proposed elevations. So the building would measure 22.3 metres long at its maximum extent, about 4.8 metres in width, and about 4.4 metres in maximum height to the ridge. And we also have the elevations of the post and rail fence there, approximately 1.2 metres in total height. Here we have the proposed floor plan. So it would be the building would be split into 5 sections with 3 stables, a hay and bedding store, and a feed and tack room, with a covered walkway to the frontage, which would face into the site. So here we have another excerpt from the neighbourhood plan showing the principal views, and the key view, as mentioned, is key view 10 here. So onto some photographs of the site. These were taken in April of this year, 2023. So this first view is from the corner of Brockford Road, Church Road and Oak Farm Lane, looking up Church Road. We then have a view looking around the corner of Brockford Road, from outside the site opposite the Glebe Way estate. And you can see the existing gated pedestrian access to the site here. And I think it's worth pointing out a similar building that you might be able to see here as what's proposed on the other side of the road. And this is a view up Brockford Road from the junction of Oak Farm Lane, and I think this shows the extent of the existing hedgerow proposed to be retained and enhanced through a landscaping scheme. And again, the similar building on the opposite side of the road there. And a view up Church Road, again, giving an idea of the existing frontage of the site. This is a view from the interior of the site. So the proposed building would be approximately in this location behind the fronting hedgerow. And this fenced area you can see there is the site of the approved dwellings. And this building over here is an existing dwelling further down Brockford Road. So this is again from inside of the site. So this is the existing boundary with the extension to the cemetery beyond. And you just might be able to make out the church tower in this location. And this boundary is proposed to be hedged as part of the proposal layout. And then just turning right from that previous view, looking further into the site. And then again moving closer to the boundary with the approved dwellings, looking back into the site, and you can see there the church tower. And again, this is looking at that boundary with the proposed dwellings and the existing dwelling. And then looking back towards Church Road at the end there. So that concludes the presentation. As set out in the papers, officers' recommendation is for approval, subject to the conditions as listed. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any questions from members? Councillor Haddingham.
Thanks. I've got two. The first one is, which is the best photo of view 10? You'd say sort of street names, but they meant nothing to me. Can you just say this is the view that's talked about on the neighbourhood plan, and it's this one?
Was that the first photo, actually? Was that slide 11? I thought might be the actual view.
I think that shows it best.
Right, okay, thank you. But I do have another question, sorry. And the other one is on slide 7, it sort of shows the entrance and everything, but I'm just thinking there's lots of sort of gateways and what have you. Yes, thank you, this one. I'm just thinking if you were bringing a horse lorry in, how would that actually work if you've got, quite a big vehicle, Thank you.
The proposal is to use this existing access, and they would. That's been assessed by Highways, and that seemed to be adequate. That's all I can say.
Maybe we could ask the agent, I think is now here. We could ask him about access. Is that okay? Have you? All right. So I think we've got Councillor Hardingham, and did I see Councillor Warboys as well? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes. Do you have any photos of the site taken from the public footpath adjacent to the church?
I don't, I'm afraid.
No. And do you have any photos of the site in its present condition?
In its present condition. The photos were taken in April. I don't have any more recent photos, I'm afraid. From the footpath, no, I have walked that footpath, and it is quite enclosed with growth at the moment. So it's a bit difficult to see outside. So without actually going on site, I don't know what photographs would really show. So that's the reason I haven't taken any. Okay.
Thank you. Anything else? Is that it? Councillor Warboys?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just need to clear up how significant the history of this site is in relationship to the current neighbourhood plan, which is quite a new neighbourhood plan, which has a visually important open space. The first application was for 8 buildings, which was turned down on appeal because it was essentially too intrusive. The second one was approved, that though the inspector did recognise that it had harm on the visual open space, nevertheless the economic value outweighed that, so the second one was approved. But those decisions all took place before the neighbourhood plan was actually established by referendum. And the question in my mind is now is how much weight, if you like, we should attach to that neighbourhood plan and its establishing by referendum this visually important space and the as the site shows, the high significant views. Would that tilt things against any economic value of development?
Well, the site has been allocated, if you like, as a visually important open space for some time. In fact, it dates back to the 1998 plan. So that's, you know, historic. And, you know, the inspector would have, in fact did. I was part of that appeal, but they took that into account when they were considering the, excuse me, the two applications you referred to. Now, yeah, the neighbourhood plan is now adopted, part of a development plan. So in terms of the weight we should be attaching to that, it's part of a development plan. So yes, full weight. And yeah, with MP10, that policy and the principal views, we should have due consideration for, I would say.
So they now carry significant weight.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Yeah, full weight. I'm not sure how, but
Mr Isbell, would you like to interject?
Chairman, just for clarity, I mean, you're supposed to make decisions in accordance with the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. The national policy framework indicates that economic benefits, can't quite remember the precise terming, but that economic benefits do carry significant weight. But the primary consideration in any planning decision should be the development plan. That's the statutory duty. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions from members? Councillor Matheson.
A look at the best slide that shows us, that illustrates the points that the heritage officers are making. So I think it would be useful to actually see what he was talking about. Right, is that whichever? Okay. So just the key point again then, the church is to the left there, and so that's the asset that's referenced.
There are three, actually. There's the church, which is grade 1 listed. You then have this moated site, which is a scheduled ancient monument, and you have the conservation area as well. So those are the three principal heritage assets we're talking about.
I see. And then the houses that have eroded the situation on that right-hand corner outside the yes. Oh, I see there, right, yes. And so, and then the view is from that corner, right. Okay, well that helps one to understand it. So, okay, that's the one question. Thank you. Yeah, the other one, being entirely unfamiliar with keeping horses, it's quite a big stable building. In fact, the heritage officer comments on that. For 3 horses, do we have any understanding of whether 3 horses and 1.4 hectares is sort of realistic? Will the horses be overcrowded on such a small piece of land? Or overgrazed or over something?
I'm afraid I don't have that information. Perhaps
Well, I definitely don't.
no, indeed. Yeah, perhaps a question for the applicant's agent who's here. I would suggest.
Councillor Elkin.
Thank you, Chair. Would it be possible to see, I think it was slide 16, which had the view to the cemetery from the field? I've got the right one. So at the moment, there's no barrier between the end of the cemetery and the field, no visual barrier, it's just...
No visual barrier, I would say. We have a post and wire fence here at the moment. But that is proposed to be a hedge as part of the landscaping scheme.
So that will change.
Yeah.
Thank you. And the other question, is it okay to have another question, was about the heritage officer had proposed potentially reorienting the stable block. And I just hadn't quite got my head around what they were suggesting.
Yeah, it's a bit difficult to really understand what their intentions are, but I presume they felt it was better to move it further towards the dwelling here, although I'm not sure what that would do to turning and parking. We'd have to check that with our highways colleagues as well, and then rotating the building through 90 degrees, so the longest axis would be adjacent to this neighbouring boundary here. I believe that's what they were.
But we're only determining what we've got in front of us,
Yes.
really. So,
Yeah.
Councillor Davis.
Sorry, Chair, the previous councillor asked a question I was going to raise. So.
Well, if there are no further questions from the rest of you, I've got a couple of questions. One of the photos showed a pedestrian access, which I believe is shown on that plan you've got on slide 7, but it almost looks like it's covered with hedge. And if that is to stay and to serve what purpose? Because it's right on the bend. That's my first question.
No, correct, Chairman, that is shown to be, yes, hedged off, I suppose, from that plan.
Yeah, it says on that plan, pedestrian access to remain. I think it's really small print, but
okay.
I think that's what it says. And it
Yeah.
just, presumably that's just a private access into that extra bit of field. That's all it is.
Yeah, it is a private access, it's not a public right of way, I can confirm that, certainly.
My second question is I sort of thought about when Councillor Warboys was talking about the Mendlesham Neighbourhood Plan, because of course Mendlesham Neighbourhood Plan was the first neighbourhood plan in Mid Suffolk, and it's been renewed in 2022, I believe, or refreshed. So with regard to the history of the site and the fact that there were numerous planning applications, first for 2 and then they tried to make it 8, were those initial applications for the first 2, was that before or after the first Mendlesham neighbourhood plan? And what has changed about this particular area in the latest version of the plan? Because it's been renewed in 2022, so presumably there are some changes. So have there been significant changes to this area of Mendlesham?
I believe the update was the addition primarily of housing allocations. I believe that was the main update. There were some, obviously, updates to the wording of the policy, but
the views and the visually important open space and all that part of the neighbourhood plan is the same as it was when it was. I can't remember what date it was first adopted, but are they the same as they were when those houses first got the got permission?
That is my recollection. I would have to.
Yeah. Does Gemma want to pop?
Well, I just wonder maybe the parish council might come back. Just perhaps that's a question for them. So I'm sure they'll have a lot more information they can share with us.
Thank you. Okay, so if there are no further questions from what page am I on? I've lost the page. Right. So we've had questions. I will now invite the public speakers to address the committee. And I think first on my list we have Mr. Paul Allen from Mendlesham Parish Council. So if you would like to press the button on your microphone, and I have my high-tech timer. You have 3 minutes to make your representation. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you for hearing me. I've got a report from the Parish Council, but firstly I'd like to address the flooding issue. And historically this may be correct, but in view of the last 2 flooding incidents which occurred 2 weeks apart, that land appeared to be flooded, which is beyond the floodplain and seriously flooded, but I only saw it from the photographs of the entrance to the dwellings, so I can't see what happened in the field. But there have been various land works done which appear to me to have reduced the level of that field. The local plan certainly says that we object to it. The historic environment will be changed slightly because of the height of the stable, and even if, as suggested, it might move, that would have to be looked at in situ when that proposal is made. The historic environment, I don't have anything to add, but this, from the site which was allowed, there have been several extra, and it's what I call salami slicing of changing the actual planning consent to suit the owners, and the size of the stable, we don't quite understand why for the two aged horses that we were originally going to expect to use that field, why there are 3 stables now required, and the size of the stables appear to be a little larger than might be in another case. And if these horses are that old, how long will it be before they die? And in that circumstances, what will happen to the established stable block once it's there? The last thing is a request that you do give weight to our planning, to our neighbourhood plan, because we've got 2 outstanding ones, one of which has been approved, which was agreed by the previous chair.
If you could finish
yeah, I will.
your final sentence, please.
Yeah, agreed by the previous chair that it was outside the neighbourhood plan, and the current one, which is not yet approved, will add, I think, 68 houses on a hill, which will lead directly into the floodplain.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any questions of the Parish Council representative? Councillor
Thank you. I was just, you mentioned the flooding. I was going to ask about that. Was the road access blocked with the recent flooding?
The village was locked in overnight, and that particular corner, I believe, was about 4 feet plus deep, as were most of the accessible roads to Mendlesham. It was really, really bad.
So in terms of somebody who maybe was trying to get through to check on animals, it would have been impossible?
Well, I do know one on the opposite side of the road who had some difficulty moving her horses to a spare piece of ground behind Moat Farm, which is listed. Which is noted on the information we be given.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Councillor Matheson.
Thank you. Yeah, I think for the officers, really, I suspect, and can you confirm, that the identity of the horses is rather like the identity of the applicant, that it's not a material consideration?
Do you just want to confirm that?
Yeah, this is one of the things. If they didn't have horses, we couldn't even consider that. It's 4A stables. It can only be used for horses under the current consent. That's what we need to consider. So yes, even if horses are aged or any horses, yes, there's nothing stopping somebody buying or purchasing them in the future.
Councillor Warboys.
I think it's just something that's come up from the chair of the Parish Council, whether he can answer it or not. The Heritage Officer describes it as domestic stable outbuilding. Does that differ to an agricultural building in the same sense that you could have development rights on an agricultural building, but a domestic stable outbuilding might not have the same development rights?
Yes, so a horse is not necessarily agriculture, and in this case we're looking at use of land for keeping of horses and stabling for them. So it's not agricultural, there wouldn't be agricultural PD rights, and there also wouldn't be residential PD rights. It's not a house, so neither of those PD rights then come in relation to the stables. It's just the stables for horses and the use of land for keeping of horses.
Right, thank you for clarifying.
Any more questions? Okay, so we don't have an objector or a supporter, but we do have the agent, Mr. Ben Elvin. So over to you, thank you. You can have your 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, members of the committee, and thanks to Alex, obviously, for his work on the application to date and for the report that you've got before you today. Firstly, this is actually a really simple proposal. The applicants are fortunate enough to have purchased this site with the planning permission in place for the 2 houses. They were not involved in any of the previous applications or the appeals, and they are building those houses currently and will want to live in one of them. They're moving from a nearby village. The applicants have these horses at their current home and simply wish to relocate them to live next to them when they move. They require that stabling for the horses and will graze them on that land, and that is all this application seeks to achieve. Comments have been made around possible commercial use, and in response to that I can tell you that's not what the application proposes and is not what is intended. Indeed, members have made comments this morning about access to that facility in terms of large vehicles, which just isn't practical. That's not what this is about. There are a total of 3 stable boxes within the building. The applicant currently has 2 horses. She rehomes horses, wishes to continue to be able to do that, and will be simply looking to potentially put a 3rd horse on there at some point in time. There is absolutely no space for commercial use to occur. The comments have been made around when development of this site will stop, and you've heard mentions of salami slicing. As I mentioned, the applicants were not responsible for any of the history of the site. There is permission to build the 2 houses. These are being constructed, and they wish to stable their horses on the land next to the dwelling they will be living in. That's it. Comments are made as to the proximity of the stables to the churchyard and burial ground. The document that you've seen this morning has not been sent to me. I've had no opportunity to comment on the Heritage Officer's comments. The application has been with this authority for over 6 months, and we are presented with late comments the night before a committee meeting with no opportunity to respond. That's my only thing I can say on that. The applicants are also more than happy to provide a waste management scheme through a condition of any permission granted. That seems to be a normal requirement for Mid Suffolk when dealing with stable applications. We don't seem to prepare them up front or have them proposed up front, and indeed there are cases where it's not required at all, but we are more than happy to provide that. This is not a proposal that gives rise to landscape impacts. It's tucked close to but not directly up against the roadside hedge, and its scale is not such it would stand out in longer views of the site. It is a simple but well-designed traditional building, traditional materials for the storage and for the accommodations and storage associated with the applicant's own horses. The applicants have confirmed that access will be through the approved access to the housing. The access that you've questioned onto the corner of the site will be closed up by hedgerow. It's not a pedestrian access, it's an error on the plan. Apologies. The issue of flooding has been raised. Despite the significant flood events experienced in Mendlesham recently, that part of the site did not flood. The lower elements where the houses are being built absolutely did. So that element where the stables are going was not underwater, and we have photographic evidence of that. The applicants are actually in the process of clearing a further ditch outside their site and desilting a road drain that is clearly blocked up with months and years of debris. They don't have to do that, but they're doing that to help that situation. In summary, your officer has fully considered all of the material considerations that are engaged, has confirmed the application meets with both existing and emerging policies. It is thereby hoped that you will support this proposal and enable the applicants to house their horses adjacent to their new home. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any questions of Mr. Elvin? If there are no other questions, can I just ask, given that it is so close to the floodplain, is the hard standing for the parking permeable?
Oh, absolutely. And you can condition that. We're more than happy with that. No problem at all.
Councillor Elvin.
Thank you. Could you tell us a little bit about lighting? Obviously, it's quite a sensitive area, a churchyard. Just wondered what the stable lighting was proposed to be.
Absolutely. We need to design something. I mean, the conditions talk about wildlife-sensitive lighting, and this is for the applicant's own horses, so it's not something we're expecting it to be lit for the purposes of other people to attend the site. So it doesn't need to be lit for livery, for example, where people would be coming and going potentially. So we'd be looking at something low-key, probably on a sensor, so that as you move, it would light, and we can control that. We just need to design it at the moment.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Davis?
Thank you, Chair. This may not be an acceptable question, but clearly our heritage officer did suggest moving the stable block through 90 degrees. Is that, obviously you haven't had a chance to look at the detail, but what's your initial reaction?
Well, actually, I can kind of see the logic to it in terms of the physical relationship to the houses. I just think actually probably in heritage terms it's going to be more harmful. It's going to be bringing the building up the side of the churchyard boundary potentially, rather than sitting away from it. I haven't spoken to the applicants at all. This was a complete surprise to me this morning. But swings and roundabouts, I can see merit, but I also can see some harm.
Thank you. Councillor Matheson?
Yeah, I guess it'd be useful to ask this question of the officers while the agent's here. In planning terms, it's been described as domestic and not commercial by the agent now, and not livery, which presumably is commercial horsekeeping. Is there any distinction to be drawn in planning terms? I mean, can we actually make that? Can we constrain the application in the way that's been described, or is that just window dressing? To be a bit unfair about it.
Sorry, is the query whether we can condition and control it to be for personal use only, rather than anything else? Yep, so we've got a condition on there at the moment. It's about halfway down and it's titled restriction on development not to be used as commercial livery, riding school or for other business purposes. So that it gives the option. I think Alex and I did discuss whether it might be personal, and that is an option open to committee, that it will be only for the person living in the house, as Mr. Evans mentioned. But I think that would not necessarily be reasonable in this case, because you've got the village. It could be somebody else in the village would go there in the future if it was sold, for example. But it would still be only their personal horses for their personal use. But that is an option.
Yeah, so what you're saying is that condition takes us as far as we can, other than if we start talking about personal to the applicant. Okay, well, we'll come back to that one.
I would probably still say that would still be personal use. You are a person and it's your horse and you're there. The question over the renting out bit is something we might need to explore further by condition and really be specific. But the critical thing is it's not a business. You've not got 3 different people having their horses there that you maybe look after them. They're in and out. Look, more movement. It's about the owner of the site or a person keeping their horses there would have the same impact. And of course we have got to be aware of, is it relevant and necessary and related to planning? I think that to me steps a little bit beyond what we might think is reasonable. If it's okay for one person to have their horses there, does it matter if they live in the house next door or one over the road or in, potentially in the village or whatnot? So I think that for me is, as I said, I think Alex and I had the conversation and did consider it in quite a lot of detail. So I think we were content that would go as far as we thought would be reasonable.
I think Mr. Isbell would like to chip.
Just because it's good to clarify further. I mean, I think it's important to distinguish between ownership and occupation. If members consider that the occupation of this in association with the adjacent dwelling is important, and that's often the case, that's important, and that's for members to debate. If cast your mind to the situation where perhaps in future the house is sold separately to this land, what then would be the relationship between the two uses? And you would want to anticipate that for sure. But there are probably quite a few questions in here which I'd suggest we see how debate goes and then come back to those.
Right. Councillor Hardingham.
Yeah. Would there be any likelihood of a further, the next step being the construction of a manege? Because this is something that we see very often with that follows on from the construction of stables and a bit of fencing. That the next move is a manege, and the next one is some lighting. As a question for the case officers, would that be a separate development, also subject to further planning?
Yeah, absolutely. We often see planning applications for manege, so would need consent, and we'd have to consider that on its merits at the time. Maybe the agent might want to come in on that point about their future plans, but just bearing in mind that that is subject to future application.
No, there's absolutely no intent to put a menage in. This is simply a relocation of her existing horse situation of keeping rehomed horses at her site a little way up the road to bringing them next to her house. So I have no understanding of any further development or proposals, which the parish council will surely be pleased to hear, of anything else going on after this position being taken today. Thank you.
If there are no further questions, then we'll move to the ward member, Councillor Andrew Stringer.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Just want to, if I may, just draw a line under a few things and get a few things out in the open. I agree with the agent wholeheartedly that it is not acceptable to have a heritage response this late in the day, to which the parish would have liked to have responded to that, because actually I think it's fundamentally flawed, because we're not able to contact the officer in this time, and while the meeting's in session, I don't think it's, that document should have been here at least 48 hours before, so we could have actually checked and double-checked what is going on, because this application has been in the mix, as you can see from the photographs were taken back in April, when everything was in full flower, and all the leaves were on the trees, and the sun was shining, and things look a great deal different today. Anyway, back to what we have in front of us. I don't think anyone has a problem with people keeping horses on this land in Mendlesham. There's been horses on this land for or part of this land for many, many years. This land does, however, have a really curious history and a vital part of Mendlesham's first and second neighbourhood plan. The views across this site have sought protection from the original local plan, 1998, and further reinforced in the first neighbourhood plan in Mendlesham, 2015, and subsequently renewed last year in the updated neighbourhood plan. So the importance of the views across this site have been known to this authority since 1998 and protected from then, deeming it a visually important open space. Those have now gone pretty much because of the new local planning framework has sought to change those, but they've been brought into the neighbourhood plan back in 2015 and renewed again last year. So this view being sought protection is nothing new. It is absolutely vital, and you can work out how vital it is if you read the inspector's decision for the 8 dwellings on this site. The inspector walked the paths. Actually, the paths that you didn't get the views from in the submission from the officer, which is very disappointing, because views are sought both ways. There are 2 bits of this site that are historically incredibly important. It's the setting of that church, rising up from the churchyard on that corner, from that corner, and also from the footpath that runs alongside of that, and from the footpath that goes along the front of the church, and the scheduled ancient monument, which is the moat. Which is why when we first saw an application on this corner for stables, and the access originally was actually coming out on that corner, which we're glad to see that's an amendment, that the access to this site is not going to be, vehicle access is not going to be round the corner. We're glad to see that. However,
the further erosion of that vista along Brockford Road is the pivotal point. Yes, it's behind a hedge, so for much of the year you won't see the stables, but from now on you will see it. And I fundamentally disagree with that Heritage Officer view. Well, the view's been split already, so we'll split all of it. It depends where you're looking from regarding the split. And if you are looking from it from the vistas that that appeal inspector looked at when he was looking whether to uphold the neighbourhood plan policies, is absolutely vital. And you today haven't seen those vistas in the presentation, and you haven't seen them at this time of year, which is really disappointing. Anyway, let's get past the disappointments. I've got a question for the officers as well. Would the approval of this application potentially create a brownfield site? First of all, I have to say I'm disappointed that the report suggests the application accords with the made and remade Mendlesham neighbourhood plan. From our perspective, from the parish perspective, it really doesn't. I'd say disappointed about the late paper, and we feel this application is still, despite the amendment with the driveway, contrary to the views protected in that neighbourhood plan and upheld by the appeal inspector in 2018. So, what do we suggest? We've had a heritage officer already saying, well, you could reorientate the building, etc., etc. Well, yeah, you could. But actually, you could put the stable somewhere else where it would then be completely in accord with the neighbourhood plan. I personally believe there is a solution here. I believe this is not the solution. And this particular solution is not in accord with that neighbourhood plan, I believe, and the parish council believes. So, where do we go from here? It's a difficult one, and it's up for you to decide. But it's very difficult for you because you haven't seen what that appeal inspector saw, and what made him refuse the 8. And that is absolutely pivotal. And I'm really, disappointed that you can't see that, despite this being in the system for over 7 months. I think that's all I needed to say in terms of the protections and why we feel this is not in accordance with the made and remade neighbourhood plan. But happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? Councillor Haddingham.
Thank you. I can see, Andrew, and I know that you are a passionate supporter of neighbourhood plans, but there are only 5 objections. What do you say? Do you just say that people are expecting you and the parish council to fight their case, and actually the whole village cares about it deeply, or are you just saying, what's your answer to only 5 objections?
That's 5 people that were minded enough to protect what is a view. And that's a view from a particular corner. I wouldn't have cared if there were none. We have policies here, and we have previous decisions here that have found the value in that. If an appeal inspector values that view, after walking it and going, actually, I'll tell you what, no, you cannot have those 8, despite the economic uplift. I don't mind people having stables around their houses. It's not a huge economic uplift. There's no livery here. There's no economic uplift to this. This is someone's domestic pleasure. Great. I really want them to be able to do that, but it needs to be balanced with the harm it might create to the rest of the community and what's written down in policy. Before this plan was drawn up, everyone knew that view was protected. Everyone knew that appeal decision and why.
If there aren't any other questions, I'd like to just ask a question. The appeal decision on the 8 referred to the view from the footpath out the back of the church that goes adjacent to the scheduled ancient monument. That appeal decision, I think, was in 2021. Was there any consideration to adding that as an important view in the updated neighbourhood plan?
Well, it is where that arrow is pointing. It's not pointing...
I thought the issue was the view from the footpath.
It is the view both ways.
But the arrow on the neighbourhood plan only goes from Brockford Road corner.
Yes, but it doesn't... But the clue is in the name, visually important open space. If you can look one way, you can look the other. And we can't put an arrow on the map that points both ways, can we?
Could. I'm saying is on that map, there isn't a green arrow pointing along the footpath up towards St Mary's Church.
But there is arrow point 10 points across a protected, visually important open space to the footpath. The footpath runs along there. It points to that footpath. So it presumes you can see the Scheduled Ancient Monument and you can see back from the Scheduled Ancient Monument. And we believe, and actually this is where it's also a bit disappointing, because our documents suggest that appeal decision in the listing in the committee papers, it said it was on an adjacent site. That appeal decision is this site. That's an important thing to note.
Any further questions?
Thank you. It's really for Alex, and I'm probably just being a bit thick. So the two houses that have been given permission, that was on another appeal, and they're just further up the road, so they don't get in the way of the view. Is that right?
So, yeah, the blue line is, outline was done at appeal. You know, we had to pick up the pieces of that and do the reserved matters. But yeah, essentially that is in the area of the blue line, and the red line for the 8 is shown in your table papers, which, yes, and my apologies, Councillor Stringer, it is, to confirm, it is part of the site. It would be this area here. But yeah, that's formally shown in your table papers.
Thank you. So, if there are no further questions, I will now open this item up for debate. Anyone like to make a contribution? Councillor Matheson, thank you.
Yeah, it's actually a question, really. The Heritage Officer found that there was, lost it again now, I must read it correctly. The harm was a very low level of less than substantial harm, yes. Is that harm that requires any public benefit?
Yes, in short. So we've got to follow paragraph 202. The second that we identify any level of less than substantial harm, it has to be outweighed by public benefit. But we are looking at what essentially is the lowest of the low, not just low, very low. So we are the small amount of harm, so it does need to be balanced by public benefits, but those benefits are only outweighing the small level of harm. So it is that sort of grains of sand, harm here, benefit here, balance that we'd need to undertake.
What do we think the public benefit actually is?
Probably subjective, isn't it? Is that a subjective question? Are you...
It's a question. Do the officers think that there is a public benefit in the application that's in front of us?
Well, Chairman, rather than try and put words into somebody's mouth, you have the agent before you. It's a question you could ask him.
Mr Elvin, would you like to say what the public benefit is of this application?
Not really. I haven't had any opportunity to think about it. This was presented to me this morning. This is the whole problem with this. As Councillor Stringer has pointed out, this is a fundamental response that potentially changes the way you need to balance your decision, and neither the officer or myself or the parish council or the ward member have given it any thought. I was working this morning, as Mr Stringer can attribute to, because I saw him in the coffee shop opposite, and I still hadn't received this. So until I walked in this chamber, I wasn't aware that we were even talking about any heritage harm. So I'm sorry, I don't know. No.
Well, I mean, I'll apologise for that, because I raised it at my chair's briefing, and I said that the appeal decision referred to heritage. The main reason was for heritage reasons as why it was refused, and I said, well, how come our heritage officers have chosen not to make a comment? So I asked the planning officers to go and ask if the heritage officers would make a comment. And I only saw it this morning, but you're right, it's too late because we need to digest it. But anyway.
I fundamentally think it's dangerous, and I suspect that the legal officer might have a view on this, to take a decision on that without any correspondence or any opportunity to respond. I don't wish to put words into people's mouths, but the applicants are going to be really, really frustrated.
to pray about whether we ought to allow the applicant and the parish to respond to this response from Heritage.
Sorry, can I be heard? Yeah, I mean, I think, Madam Chair, if I may say so, there should be no criticism of you for raising the point at Chair's briefing. It was, I think, if you like, the fairness depended on what was said, because you might have had a comment, a late comment, saying we really have nothing to say, councillors. But I think there may be a fair point that it is a quite detailed response. It only refers to a low level of substantial harm. But we've heard it said the applicant's agent feels a bit aggrieved that he would like to have had a better opportunity to consider it with his client. And we're hearing, I think, that the parish council have some reservations and questions about the nature of it. I think, yeah, I mean, I think I read it about the same. I was aware of it at the same time as most people. At the very least, we need to consider, yes, whether there would be an issue of fairness either way with the decision made on that basis. Like to take a bit of time out to speak to colleagues, but if the Chief Planning Officer may have something to say to
Mr. Isbell.
Thank you, Chairman. Just listening to the debate and discussion, I think Mr. Elvin and his client would clearly like to walk out this with a decision that everyone can be confident in. I think the Parish Council would like that. I think the Ward Member would like that. The question of how we get to here with the comment from Heritage and the question of the appeal decision and its relevance, you know, I mean, that question of mature reflection I accept. Now, there's clearly a question about whether this building is orientated in a way which members may find acceptable or otherwise, and leaving aside the question of whether you think the heritage impact is such as it is, perhaps there's value in members proceeding to debate this so that we have clarity as officers as to whether or not they are minded to accept it or not. If, bearing in mind that Mr. Elvin has expressed concerns about not having had access to these comments, one could do various things. One option is to actually go and see this for yourself, to walk the footpath, to go and look at it on the ground, and take stock of both the important views and the overall character of the open space. So those are options open to the committee. But I think to do that without actually having some sense of whether you think this is going in the right direction might be doing the applicant a disservice, in the sense that, as I understand it, there are concerns about the building as it presently exists. The Heritage Officer has made some comments about whether it might be reorientated. If Mr. Elvin and his client are not willing to do that, then that's an answer in itself. But that site visit and that opportunity for engagement would allow the breathing space in which that conversation could happen. But if members say, yeah, we're not worried about that particular orientation of the building, then there will be little point in officers trying to pursue a discussion about it. So it would help officers to have an instruction from committee which kind of informs what members are minded to do. So just thinking this through, it would seem valuable to proceed with the debate and to get to that sort of conclusion, perhaps to allow for that to happen, and to allow for some reflection on what's before you, and for members to indicate their general wishes, so that officers can then, you know, review this with the applicant. And that's just what occurs to me at this point in time.
Thank you. Councillor Lawrence.
The first is that the applicant, in my view, should have had full knowledge of what the neighbourhood plan entailed and the views in that plan when considering purchasing or building one of these properties for their use. And I think it inappropriate that they should be able to then come at a later stage and override what is in that neighbourhood plan in an application for their personal benefit. Neighbourhood plans to me are very important. Small communities spend an awful lot of time and money reviewing the plans, producing the plans and updating them, and the constant erosion of plans by people moving into the village, even if it's from a nearby one, should not in any way be encouraged. And I think by approving, if we are minded to approve this, that we're just almost tearing up local plans to a certain extent. And I totally disagree with the constant erosion of heritage assets and heritage views. It's just constant nibbling away, and the presentation we have here, in my view, is, well, the view is split, the heritage is split anyway, what the hell, is totally wrong. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else like to make comment? Councillor Hardingham?
Well, I'd like to raise a completely different point, which is that I note from the documents we've got that where new stables are proposed, applicants will need to demonstrate that riding or other activities can take place on their own land or other land by legal agreement on a long-term basis or on nearby defined bridleways or byways. And while this particular fairly small field of about 1 hectare might well be adequate for 2 or 3 elderly horses to meander about on, if those horses are then replaced by something else altogether, they will need exercise. There are no defined bridleways or byways accessible nearby. Just wanted to raise that point.
Councillor Matheson, did I see your hand?
Yeah, really, I just, you know, I'm just anxious that whether making a decision, you know, whether a decision would be a risk in terms of the the unsatisfactory consultee submission at the last minute. You know, if we were using that as part of a reasons for refusal, or even for approval, despite it, you know, are we not, you know, taking a risk which we could avoid by actually deferring possibly for a site visit and for people to have a proper look at the heritage submission? You know, I don't feel very comfortable about it personally, but you know, I think legally that is the key thing. Is it a risk to take the decision?
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, it's not at all uncommon for consultees and officers to make late, almost last-minute comments, though it would often be in the context where they've already commented first and they're responding to further issues. It depends on the circumstances. I can't deny Councillor Matheson may have something of a point that this is, if you like, if I've not very much mistaken, the first we've heard substantively from our heritage colleagues on this application is, yes, I think colleagues are nodding. I thought that was the case. And it's something's being said which the agent has only had at the last minute, and the parish council, if I heard correctly, the parish council and the ward member have concerns and disputes with what is said in the heritage comment. May I just ask Councillor Stringer if I'm right about that?
Yeah, I mean, I've read very quickly, as Ben's read, the response from the heritage officer. I think there's an issue with it in terms of the language from where we're coming from. We fundamentally disagree with what the heritage officer is saying, but we've had no time to understand from what viewpoint that heritage officer is making that. He may be making it from the viewpoint of number 10 on the list of our views. Then okay, then that's his opinion. He might have been looking at it at the wrong end as far as we're concerned. But we don't know that, and we can't find out.
Thank you, Councillor. So I think that the Chief Planning Officer is right that it would not be legally wrong to proceed with a discussion that gave an indication of views as far as we can ascertain them on matters which he set out, if members feel it's appropriate to do that. But I think I would have reservations about a resolution to approve or refuse being made today.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I think you raised a good point, actually, with your question, Councillor Matheson, about the fact that if there is any harm, we need to see some public benefit. And I'm a bit concerned about this view from the footpath that, to my mind, isn't the same as an arrow pointing into the field from the corner. Views go both ways, and why not put the arrow both ways? And I think it is a bit disappointing that we don't have any views from that footpath, because on looking at it just purely from a plan, it looks like that stable is not going to be intrusive if you're on the footpath looking at the church and the scheduled ancient monument. But I don't know, because I've never walked along that footpath and we've got no views of it. So I'm thinking maybe we ought to go and have a look at it and actually walk on that footpath and see what we think a stable in that corner might look like. And that would give a bit of breathing space to actually then digest the heritage officer's comments. But I'll hear what other people have got to say.
Well, I think my response is the legal advice and the chief planning officer's advice seems to be that we could usefully carry on and debate, but not take the decision, and then go and have a look, which is unusual. I can't actually remember doing that before, but if that's best advice, then.
What I'm trying to say is I don't think I can make a decision until I've seen the view from that footpath, because it looks on the plan to be fairly unobtrusive, but we're hearing from the locals that it will really affect that view from the footpath. So I don't know. Councillor
If I was waiting if John was going to propose that we go and see it, I don't think we can discuss it until we've actually seen it. There's no point saying, well, I think this, when we, completely might do a 180 turnaround and then surprise everyone after we've actually looked at it. So if John hasn't proposed a site visit, then I'm happy to do that.
Thank you. And Councillor Davis, did you have your hand up as well? Sorry, I missed your hand waving.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah. No, I was going to make the same point, really. I'm a strong supporter of local neighbourhood plans. And on this topic, without being able to actually see this valuable landscape, it's for me not possible to take a decision. So I would very willingly second the proposal to have a visit.
So we now have a proposer and a seconder for a site visit, a deferral in order to do a site visit. Do we also want to add in that there needs to be some, I don't know, what's the word, interpretation of the Heritage Officer's recent comments? Councillor Warboys has his hand up. Did you want to say something? Let's hear Councillor Warboys and then perhaps Mr Isbell can explain.
Yeah, well, I think I'm in favour of actually sort of a site visit, so we need to actually really look at the impact of this. I also think perhaps Councillor Hardingham's comments need to be taken up as well, because perhaps we do need to look at how this links into bridle ways and other ways of exercising horses or enjoying the facility of the stables there. That almost seems to me a sort of little gap in the consultation as well.
Lawrence, did you want to chip in before Mr Isbell?
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, I'm quite intrigued. I'd like to do a site visit, but I'm just curious within my own mind, and it's almost a self-question. By doing a site visit and looking at the scene ourselves, are we setting ourselves above what the locals think the value of that scene is? Are we acting like little tin gods again? Thank you.
Interesting point, thank you. Mr Isbell.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I'll have a go at that one. No, if I can just take that point. No, I don't think so. I mean, this is a democratic process. One of the things that my interest in your expressing a view as to what you were minded to do and accepting that you haven't seen the land on the ground and haven't seen the relationship of things is you've heard from the Parish Council, you know there's a neighbourhood plan policy. That's development plan. Section 38(6) of the Act says you follow the development plan unless there's some other material consideration. Obviously, Mr Elwin's been put on the spot about the public benefits question. That's for him perhaps to answer, and it is the right test in relation to heritage, because not only have you got the NPPF to address, but you have to follow the statutory code and ensure that you, safeguard heritage assets under the statutory duties that you have. But there is no harm in going and looking. I mean, you're about to hear another application in another parish with a different recommendation. This is a democratic process. If it was simply down to officers, that there is a question of confidence in your decision making, which comes from going on a site visit and gaining information. I personally feel that if you went on that site visit and said, well, thank you very much, it's lovely to see that, but actually we're going to follow the neighbourhood plan anyway, the purpose of that site visit would be a little bit OTS. So actually there is value in expressing some sort of view as to whether you think that's an important point the applicant needs to deal with, because Mr. Alvin is unlikely to recommend to his client to think about the orientation of the building if there's no steer to do that. If we're simply going to follow the neighbourhood plan, then I imagine making a decision here and now would be the most expeditious thing. But taking in the round, going on a site visit is always a sensible thing if you don't feel you can make a decision on the information you have before you. So it's not a wasted exercise, even if by and large you think you know what you're going to see. But I think there is a value here. The application's been in for a while, we don't want to prolong it, but there is a value here in being able to give confidence to Mr. Alvin as to which direction we might be going, because he might wish to advise his client, you need to consider the size of this building, you need to consider its orientation, and that discussion can happen whilst you're going on your site visit. And we know that the land and its character is important to the community. That's written in spades in the neighbourhood plan. If that's something that you think really is something of great focus for you, maybe this is an opportunity to express it. Can I ask one last question? Councillor Hardingham talked about various requirements about access to bikeways and other things. Perhaps he can help me, just remind me where he drew that from.
It's actually in this planning document. I'm afraid this has just shut itself down again, but fine. Right, paragraph 3.4, page 22 of the agenda.
So Jim, to conclude, you've got a proposal of a site visit. I think there's value in indicating some sort of whether you're minded to go in favour of this or might seek to follow the neighbourhood plan and take a view about its orientation or size, just so that officers can have that conversation. But I fully accept that's just me as an officer expressing a preference, and if committee don't want to do that, they don't have to.
Councillor Haddingham.
Thank you. Can I just say what I feel that the value of the site visit is, clearly this is an important view, it's on the neighbourhood plan. None of us want to go against the neighbourhood plan, but surely we are then looking at this important view and thinking, does this affect it or not? No one wanted to go against the neighbourhood plan, but we've got to sort of think, how is this affecting this important view? Surely that is the reason for the site visit.
Councillor.
Yeah, I think, reflecting on Mr. Isbell's advice and so on, the two issues, not only the view, etc., and the heritage, but the heritage is the first point at which the orientation of the building has been raised. So I don't think we can, we need to give the officers an opportunity to read the heritage advice. And when you said about interpreting it, I think, digesting it, and etc., and I don't think there's any benefit in trying to discuss any of this today.
Councillor Hardingham.
Well, in the first place, I would be inclined to agree with Councillors Davis and Lawrence on the primacy of the local plan. But as a separate point altogether, this council is absolutely committed to improving nature in the district, 30 by 30, and increasing biodiversity. In terms of public benefit that might be derived from the development, I would suggest that BNG, biodiversity net gain, might be something that could be considered if one were minded to approve it. And then the question arises, what is the condition of the site at the moment? What was the condition of the site 6 months or a year ago when, from the Google Street View that I've looked at, it was rather diverse tusky grass of quite high biodiversity value, and we don't know what the state of it is now. But I gather it might be considerably worse. So I think that's something that we could think about in terms of ecological benefit.
Thank you. Did I hear, did I see Councillor Warboys or not?
Yeah, I haven't quite got my thoughts in order, so I might ramble a bit more than usual. When I looked at this plan, it seemed quite a sensible place to put stables in relationship to the buildings, because there was little toe of the boot, as it were, of the building to put it on. But looking at the neighbourhood plan and the history of the site and the impact of this development on that is for me a sort of pivot around which everything could be decided. This late appearance of the document from the heritage people, and there's one line in it, a realignment of the building would remove the harm entirely, which would actually sort of cancel out a lot of my reservations. And this was alluded to by Councillor Stringer as well, in that he mentioned that it will be possible to sort of reduce or possibly remove any impact on this visual space by a realignment of the outbuildings. I think it is very unfair on the agent to sort of ask him to sort of respond to this document at this moment in time. He's only just got it, and I think it's perhaps wrong for us to really base our decisions on what's been put in this document, because we're getting information which other people can't. It's not transparent anymore, is it? It's really muddied the waters. So I think we do, the site visit may give us an insight into what the site looks like at this time of year. I did visit the site on Google, if you like, and travelling along Brockford Road, you wouldn't be aware of a visual open space on the other side of the hedgerow, because it was in the middle of the summer, and unless you were riding a horse, you won't be able to see over the hedgerows, apart from through the pedestrian access on the corner. I think it would be of value to see it at this time of the year when that impact is there. But the site visit would give a breathing space to allow the agent and the parish council to sort of respond to this document and what this document says, in particular about removing the harm entirely. So that's my thoughts on the matter. I think we could discuss this at length, but at the moment, the direction of travel, if you like, my thoughts is towards support of the neighbourhood plan and protecting the visually significant open space, because that's historically been established. And we could have more arguments about the level of harm of these buildings. They're low-level buildings, and they're for domestic use, and I think the social benefits are quite important. There's the well-being for keeping horses for the residents. So I think we need that breathing space, and the site visit would probably give us the mechanism by which we could get that breathing space, and then we could come to a decision that we would be confident in.
Thank you. I must admit, sorry, I just wanted I struggle with this reorientation of the building bit, because I can't visualise exactly what the heritage officer thinks will be better, because purely from a desktop view, you're right, that building looks like it's tucked away in a corner that you can't really see from the footpath that well. So maybe it's the size of the building that may have more impact than where it is, really, because it does have 3 stable sections. It's got quite a high roof. Maybe if it was that bit smaller, it would have less impact, or that would remove the harm. I don't know. We don't know. We haven't had a chance to digest it. So I think I'd be supporting a site visit and a breathing space to give officers and the agent and the parish council a chance to reflect on the latest document we've had from Heritage. Councillor Elk.
Thank you. I was just, yes, sort of very similar really. Would feel really uncomfortable getting any further with it today and would really welcome being able to go and see it, and obviously want to support the neighbourhood plan fully, but I just feel like we don't have enough information, and perhaps the parish council and the agent also need to have opportunity. So yeah, I would really like to go and see it. But I just wanted to echo Councillor Hardingham's point about BNG and the importance of that if we're looking at sort of direction of travel and public benefit. I just wanted to say that's something perhaps that could be considered sort of in this breathing space. So thank you.
So we have a proposer and a seconder for a site visit. Do we need any more details on what that proposal should be before we go to a vote? Or is it just that we're going to vote for a site visit?
I mean, I'm happy to, Chair. I mean, from the notes I've made in various things, I had put deferral for a committee site visit, and I suppose the question in my mind is whether that includes and to review the size and siting of the stable building with regards to the Heritage Harmon View 10, so that we're not taking a specific direction, but we might review it in light of that, which seems to what members are seeking to my mind, but I'm open to yourselves whether that's...
Does that seem okay with the proposer and the seconder? Yep, so if that's okay, can we go for the electronic vote, please?
Okay, thank you, members. So I've amended that vote. That application number DC 23000305 be deferred to enable site inspection to be undertaken and to review the application as detailed by the area planning manager, and the application to return to committee.
Thank you. So that's now in
progress. So Councillor Lawrence, have you managed to log in? Brilliant, thank you. Thank you, members. That's 7 votes for and 1 against, therefore that's carried. We have a proposed date of November the 22nd. Okay. I'll look at some dates and send some details around, some proposals.
But that is the date when we have a penciled in provisional.
Yeah.
And I thought it worked quite well. I mean, obviously we can't please everybody, but I thought it worked quite well when we had the site visit and then we came back and determined the application on the same day. I thought that worked quite well, but you could get a substitute, yeah. Thank you for that. That's the end of item 7A. So I'm going to propose that we have a comfort break, and I believe the visitors are going to come in for the second application. So Thank you and welcome back. We now go to our second case, DC 23033872, Hemingstone Fruit Farm, Main Road, Hemingstone. And I invite the case officer, Nikita Mossman, to introduce the application to committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, members. This is application DC 23033872 at Hemingstone Fruit Farm on Main Road in Hemingstone, and the proposal is for the erection of additional EG business units building and associated works. For background, the most relevant planning history includes a lawful development certificate that was sought in 2016/2017 to establish the use on the site, which was considered lawful, and a further application in 2019/2020 for the continued use of storage and distribution with a builder's yard and associated offices, which was granted. Since the 2019 application, some of the use has been converted to smaller EG units through permitted development, but this was not confirmed if it was lawful with an application or lawful development certificate. This is the aerial map view showing the site in its context with the existing buildings to the north and the residential dwellings nearby. This is a wider view aerial map which shows the rural nature of the site and main road running through the middle. This is the site location plan with the red line showing the site and the blue line showing the land in the applicant's ownership. This is the constraints map, which shows that there is a Grade 2 listed building to the north of the site and the existing buildings, there's a Grade 2 listed building to the north of the site and east of the existing buildings that is highlighted in yellow. There is also a risk of surface water flooding on the east of the site, which is shown by the black lines. It should also be noted that the site is outside of any designated settlement boundary and is therefore considered to be in a countryside location. Here is the site layout showing the existing parking and access to be retained with the proposed parking, the business unit and the staff picnic area. These are the proposed elevations with the north elevation at the top, the south elevation below, and the east and west elevations at the bottom. The proposed materials comprise of powder-coated metal composite panels and trims for the walls and roof, and UPVC for the windows and doors. The proposed eaves height is 3.2 metres and the proposed ridge height is 4.4 metres. This is the proposed roof and floor plan. This shows that there are 6 units proposed within the building and the total floor area is 600 metres squared. The proposal also includes solar panels on the roof of the proposed building. Moving on to site photos, this shows the existing buildings on the site and this proposal has a similar design to the single-storey building at the front. This shows the existing entrance and car park to the site, which is being retained. This is a view of the site showing the area where the proposed building would be sited and the relationship it would have to the existing buildings. This is another view of the site from the northwest corner facing west, and this shows where the proposed building would be located. This is a view standing in the northwest corner facing south. Here is the boundary vegetation between the existing car park and the proposed car park. This is the view from the access facing north onto Main Road and the view facing south. And this is the view of the access to be retained, and this shows the land opposite the site. In conclusion, the recommendation is to refuse planning permission. This is due to the unsustainable location of the proposed building and the lack of strategic, environmental or operational justification for the building to be in this location as required as part of policy CS2 of the Mid Suffolk core strategy. The proposed development is brought forward on a speculative basis with no identified occupiers, and whilst it is an extension of an existing site, it does not represent an extension to an existing business, and the applicant has failed to evidence a commercial need for the proposed development. This is therefore contrary to policies CS2, E9 and E10 of the development plan, as well as SBO3 and SBO5 of the emerging joint local plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any questions from members? Councillor Matheson.
Yeah, I guess just can you confirm that the district has got a satisfactory amount of employment land allocated and not yet developed?
No, that's fine. I think that would be a difficult question given the progress of our JLP. We obviously had allocations and they are still available under the current development plan up until the point at which we adopt part 1 of the JLP, and then allocations will be open again, so there is that potential. Also, the JLP does allow for commercial sites within the A14 corridor, and this site is outside of that, so it doesn't fall into either of those options. I know that's not strictly an answer, but I hope that clarifies a little bit.
Thank you. Any more questions? Councillor Elk.
Thank you. Can I just ask, I think it said that the heritage comment was that there hadn't been a full heritage impact assessment provided. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. They had identified a very low level of less than substantial harm, and we had to outweigh it by public benefit, and we considered that due to the amount of employment that the site would bring, that it could be outweighed as it's a very low level of less than substantial harm.
So they hadn't had full info, but their sort of professional opinion was that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We now invite the public speakers to address the committee, and we have Tina Newell from the Parish Council. If you'd like to press the button on your microphone, and I will time you for 3 minutes. Thank you.
Madam Chair, members, thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak. I'm speaking today as the Parish Clerk to Hemingstone Parish Council, a body of members elected to represent the residents of the parish. The Parish Council raised objections following a Parish Council meeting held on the 10th of October, which was attended by a large number of residents, who all cited significant concerns regarding this application and its potential adverse effects on themselves and other local residents. These concerns include the lack of information regarding the proposed on-site activities and the current breaches, plural, in planning conditions already on this site, and the enforcement action should further breaches occur. Additionally, the Parish Council expressed concerns over the adverse impact of light, noise and smell pollution, for this site does not align with the rural character of the parish. Furthermore, the Council highlights that the proposed operating hours would negatively impact the residents, particularly those in a parish class as a hamlet. The Class E zoning, which includes commercial, business and service activities, was discussed in relation to the intended use of the site. The Council believes that the application seems to be speculative, lacking detailed justification or a clear demonstration of need. The Parish Council emphasised the importance of providing evidence of deliverability and interest in occupancy to ensure certainty in project delivery. The impact on close neighbours is underscored, referencing past experiences with vehicles and on-site issues, including the burning of waste, light and noise pollution. The potential encroachment of modern industrial development around the charity farmhouse is noted, raising concerns about disrupting the appreciation of the designated heritage asset within its historical function within an agricultural setting. The Council also expresses concerns about the proposed development's impact on light pollution, noise pollution, and its potential negative effects on wildlife and surrounding immediate neighbours. The Council is concerned the development will impact the fragile ecosystem and the serenity of the countryside. The potential increase in traffic, particularly fast-moving and high-volume traffic on country roads created by the site, is highlighted as another major concern, putting additional pressure on the already poor condition of rural roads and amenities. In conclusion, the Parish Council would strongly ask the committee to object to the application due to its impact on residents' amenities, including the noise, lighting, hours of operation, vehicle movement and adverse impact on a heritage asset.
Thank you. Do we have any questions of the Parish Council representative? No, thank you very much. We now have an objector, Dave Penny. If you would like to press the microphone, and you've got, oh well, you just have to wait for my timer to get off because Ms Newell wasn't as long as the 3 minutes. I want to give you your full 3 minutes. So, right, any time you want to start, I'll start the timer. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I live approximately 250 metres to the south of the site, which was not included on the map there. It was suggested by several other of the objectors that I took the full 3 minutes. It's important to include some background information. The level of activity and noise is already completely out of character with this rural area, and we can't see that any further increase in activity can be sustainable. Hemingstone Fruit Farm has had no connection with fruit or farming since it was sold in 2019. It has been the site of C&L Construction, who operate tarmac and digging gangs, overhead and underground cabling operations, and planning and design of installation of traffic management. It's a large-scale operation. This has been somewhat of a shock to our small rural hamlet, as the number and amount and noise of vehicles, which are usually drop-sided flatbed trucks with digger trailers attached, and we now understand that there are 200 workers who use this site with the subsequent loading and unloading. Prior to that, there were orchards and no more than half a dozen permanent workers. According to the emerging joint local plan, this development would not favour local development, as it's more than 2 kilometres outside the A14-A140 corridor. The site's approximately 2.75 from the nearest point of the A18 and 3.5 kilometres from the A140 as the crow flies, and further by road. The most direct would be via a quiet lane. Further, there is absolutely no need for the expansion of activities at this location. There are currently 14 available at Claydon Court of various sizes. Admittedly, some are slightly larger than the proposed. This site is right on the 814. There's one available at Sproughton and also one at Hadley Road and Handford Cut. All these are in addition to an unknown quantity of units that are available to let right now at Akenham, which is between Hemingstone and Ipswich. I didn't even get as far as looking at what was currently available at Needham and Stowmarket at the weekend. The applicant kindly attended a residents' meeting following repeated invitations, which was great, but when asked about the need, he said that there had been loads of interest and repeated that, but without any substantive evidence. When we continued to push him, he said he did recall that someone had wanted to store and distribute candles from there. He was completely unable to say where this or other users would be travelling from, or why it was needed to be in Hemingstone. No, Johnny almost provided information about 200 people work from the site. I'm aware that the owner and one other applicant actually live in the village. The other 198 therefore travel, predominantly, I believe, from Ipswich, as their vehicles are often seen on the drives. There are a couple of companies...
Can you finish your... Okay. With your final sentence?
We're concerned how noise travels is dependent on various aspects such as screening and wind direction. For example, the properties directly to the east of the site are screened to an extent by the existing structures. Development to the south and east of the recreational area, in my view, could not do anything other than create noise and disturbance, especially to Charity Farmhouse.
Thank you. Do we have any questions of Dave Penny? Councillor Elkin.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I guess it's for Mr Penny and the parish as well. I know we can't take existing enforcement situations into any sort of consideration, but without getting into that, you both mentioned sort of noise pollution, light pollution. I just wondered if there was anything you wanted to add about that.
Yes, Matt, may I answer?
Yeah, do answer.
There is currently a live enforcement case concerning hours of operation. The site has been operating out of hours. Admittedly, In the last couple of months, surprisingly, they've been a lot better. There are also two other potential enforcement cases. There's an area to the northeast of the site, which has been has become hard standing since the site was taken over in 2019, and an ambulance support service operates out of there. Planning enforcement have invited them to submit a retrospective planning application as the hard standing was put in without planning. Planning enforcement have also asked them to put in a retrospective planning application for an area to the south east of the site, which doesn't appear on the map. Subsequently to those photos taken, it has now become a storage area. So planning enforcement are asking for a retrospective one there.
Thank you. Any further questions? So we will move to, we don't have a supporter, we do have the agent, Nick Barber. So if you would like to press the button on the mic, and you'll have your 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Firstly, as has been alluded to, existing enforcement action has no bearing on this application. It has to be put completely to one side. We are currently putting together applications as requested by the enforcement officer. We are dealing with it. And as Mr. Penny himself just accepted, things have been improving. So, the application before you, a couple of years ago, as Nikita mentioned, the existing use was adapted to make some smaller business units, really quite small, for business starters that were working in garages at their own residential properties and the like. When they were marketed, there was indeed an awful lot of interest in them. My clients aren't estate agents. They're not commercial developers, so they didn't think for 1 minute to take details of everybody that was interested. The type of business that are interested are the ones, 1, 2 people who suddenly find themselves working in their garage and needing extra space. They're not the kind of businesses who plan 2-3 years in advance to be able to say, when you get this through planning and it's built in 3 years' time, yes, we'd really be interested in a small unit. Small businesses are far too fluid for that. So, moving on, we carried out a pre-app application with the council. Planning officers were wholly supportive of the proposal. We then moved on to develop the scheme and put in the planning application. There are no objections to this from your economic development, who accept the need, otherwise they would have objected. Your ecology officers, equally supportive, because we are enhancing the site. The area that Nikita referred to as a picnic area is a wildlife area with swale. There is improved tree planting. There are bat boxes and the like included in the application as provided for by the ecology report. Highways, no issues with regard to traffic at all on the road network. No increase of potential highways risk. Fire service, equally happy and supportive, and environmental health. Now this is perhaps of particular interest because the proposed use is Class E, which as defined by planning use classes is, and I quote, suitable for use in a residential area. So the government has already decided that this use is suitable for this area. It will not, by definition, create issues of light pollution, noise, odours, smells, or the like. So, quite frankly, the objections with regard to noise and the like.
Are you almost finished? If you could wrap up with your final sentence, please.
Okay, absolutely. So where are we? Yes, the objections that have been made are based on previous issues at the site which are being addressed, and they are based on conjecture and misinterpretation of information within the application documents, including the belief in the village that the application is for 24/7 use, which it is demonstrably not. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions of the agent? Councillor Elk.
Thank you. You mentioned that the new proposed units would be Class E, I think. Is that
Yes.
the same as the existing units on site?
The existing use is for Builder's Yard and B8, I believe, but the smaller units were created in what was, I get confused now since they've changed, I think it was B2 from B8, which was permitted development. B2 is effectively the same as Class E. I think I've got those right the way round. Yeah. So it is the same use as those small units which were created recently, yes.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? I'd just like to ask a question of my own. You say you're currently in discussion with planning officers about some other applications at the site.
Yes.
Because of the issues that have been raised earlier. Is there any consideration of some sort of master plan of what your, of your vision for the site of the future? Because that would be really helpful for us. I know we can't take speculative applications into consideration for cumulative impacts, but if there are more applications forthcoming, had you considered putting them all in as a sort of master plan?
It's not my understanding from my discussions that there is any intention to expand further. What I was asked to do was look and see how I thought the site could be developed for this scale of unit. I've not had any further discussions at all. So, my brief started with looking at the whole site, which, as you've seen from the plans, is quite extensive, the blue line, and saying, analysing that, the strengths, weaknesses, threats of the whole site, and saying, what can we do, where can it be best positioned, and how will it fit in with all the other requirements like highways, ecology, and everything else, and where we give the best solution for everybody. I've no idea. The other issues that are enforcement were, I believe, issues before I got involved. I haven't got any.
So the applications that are currently in discussion with planning officers, they're to sort of regularise the issues that have been raised by enforcement?
Absolutely, yeah. There was a meeting with enforcement on site, and it was suggested how they were dealt with, and that's what we're progressing.
Thank you. Any further questions? Okay, so we'll now move on to the ward member, Councillor John Whitehead. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, members. I'm rather surprised this application has actually come to committee. The Parish Council only requested it be brought to committee should the officers be minded to approve it, and the parish comments indicate a clear hostility to this development. The officers' report also indicates that 13 online comments were received, 13 objecting and none in support. In fact, the only support for the application detailed in the report comes from our economic development team, who do set out an economic case for the development. Now, given the existing business units and offices, my first thoughts were that this application seemed a logical expansion on the site. I then attended a parish meeting, and here I'm talking about a good turnout of local residents from a small hamlet, rather than just, say, a few parish councillors. And the strength of local opinion against this application became abundantly clear. Now, almost all of my past experience addressing planning committees as a ward member has been to do my very best to represent my residents' objections to an officer's recommendation for approval. Members, you all know that's an uphill task and a big ask. But with this particular application, that task is much easier because I can let the officer's report do the talking. So we read that the site is in a countryside location, the proposed buildings are on arable land, the site is located outside the settlement boundary and is not along the strategic transport corridors. It's not the expansion of an existing business, but rather a speculative development with now identified occupiers. The requirement to evidence a locational need has not been met. So I don't feel I need to expand further. I think the officer's report in paragraphs 11.1 to 11.6 clearly articulate the reasons for refusal in a better way than I could ever paraphrase them. So I'd like to close by saying that I do understand the reason why the applicant has brought this application forward. He explained at the parish meeting, which I attended, how the development and the income from it would generate would form a part of his retirement planning. You know, that strikes me as a genuine and noble reason. However, members, as a planning committee, you're here to judge the application before you strictly on planning grounds only. And on that basis, I, for one, would be extremely surprised if you went against the officer's recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any questions of Councillor Whitehead? No? Okay, so I will now open the item up for debate. Anyone like to make a contribution? Councillor Hedingham.
I think it's quite a clear-cut case, and I'm quite happy with what the officer's recommendation and hearing from the public and the parish council and the ward member, and I'm happy to propose that we go along with the officer's recommendation for refusal.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder for Councillor Hedingham's proposal? Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Did you want to make any comments at this time? Anyone else want to say anything about this proposal we've now got? Councillor Matheson, are you itching to say anything? No, probably not. look like you
no, no, really, I just kind of feel the need to you know, understand the use classes and you know what use class is permitted that's given rise to a level of noise that's we've heard from the objector, and that presumably noise is part and parcel of the various enforcement cases. I just wondered, all right, we understand the new E class suitable residential areas, and you know what's an acceptable level of noise really, and what's unacceptable in the existing use of the next door building, which is, I think we heard B8 or was B2 mentioned as well at some point. Yeah, help us with any of that at all, just improve my understanding.
I mean, I'm not. What's there at the minute, Katie? You might have to remind me.
So there was a B8. They got permission for a B8 continued use on the site, and then it was converted under kind of permitted development change of use to a B1, I think, which is now EG.
So it's the same.
And EG is your, yeah.
The same thing is giving rise to enforcement action on noise grounds already.
Yeah, I mean, there is yes, EG has been found to be appropriate in a residential area, so it's office uses, things one might do at home in the garage, as has been referenced. They might be slightly noisy, but not so much as to give a nuisance. I think the separation point might be the fact that you can then become a noise nuisance depending on the scale and volume and time of those things. Now, I haven't seen any of that, so I couldn't comment, and obviously that's the subject to our enforcement investigation, so we do have to tread fairly carefully in separating the two issues here today, but the concern from us, or I think we haven't got a concern, we have spoken to our environmental health colleagues, it is EG use and we could restrict it to that. So in terms of a refusal on noise or nuisance grounds, I don't think we're suggesting that at this time, unless you've got particular concerns beyond that.
No, that's helpful, thank you. I certainly support the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to make a comment on this application? Councillor Warboys?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think I am sympathetic with many of the arguments put forward by the agent, in particular the need for small-scale industrial units. And the design of the building with photovoltaic cells, EV charging points, you know, it has a lot of potential, I think. However, I also agree very much with the planning officer's comments that this is the wrong place for this kind of development. It's the extension of a former fruit packing site, which is now a commercial industrial unit. And although the comments and the outstanding planning enforcement situation and the comments from the parish council show the difficulties of operating this kind of industrial site on the outskirts of a small rural hamlet. This is very much an open countryside around it. So although it's the right kind of building and perhaps it does serve a contribution to the economic space, I think this is very much the wrong space. We have got plans for along the A140 corridor and the A14 corridor for planned industrial employment spaces, which I think we should stick to at this point. So I'm in support of the planning officer's recommendations.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to say anything? I'll just say my thoughts. I do think that some thought has gone into this application. There is a sort of biodiverse bit of greenery by the picnic area. The design of the building looks okay. It's got solar panels on. I think the applicant has done some homework there, so I'd like to think that that's all very well. But this clearly is a site in the countryside, and it's got a lot of van. When you look at the Google Street View picture, it looks like it's sort of overflowing with white vans, and they've all got to go along those narrow lanes, and that's the existing built commercial development. And just because there's already commercial development, should we really be intensifying that traffic on the rural roads when, as was pointed out by the objector, there are several small business units available in more sustainable locations, and ideally we'd like those small businesses to take those up rather than build some new ones in this rural location. So I will be supporting the proposal because it isn't really a sustainable location, and just because we've already got industrial activity there doesn't make it right to put any more. So does anyone else wish to say anything? So we have a proposer and a seconder, and we've got the proposal as it is in our papers, you've got the reasons for refusal. So are we happy to proceed with the electronic vote? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Members, that vote is now in progress. Thank you, members. That's 8 votes for refusal, Chair. That's carried. Thank you.
Thank you. So that we have no further items on our agenda. So item number 8 is site inspections. We have now got a site inspection request from the previous application, so the officers will be arranging that in due course and hopefully sorting out a convenient date. And there are no other requests for site inspections. So I can now formally close the meeting at 12 o'clock.